Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast. Today we have John Dupre Gauntt with us today. He's director and host of the Seattle AI Film Festival, founder and host at Culture and Code podcast, and has hosted a bunch of other podcasts, including the Augmented City podcast, previously founder at Media Dojo and a bunch of other companies. Um, MIT Sloan School of Management educated, got that certificate in 2017. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about AI videos today because I've been using Sora and all of these incredible AI tools. I'm a creator myself, and if I can outsource it to an AI that will do an equal, if not better job than I will, then let's do it. I'm using Opus Pro, by the way, which is probably my favorite shorts creation tool. So let's talk about that one today as well. This podcast is presented to you by podfire.com. If you want to start your own podcast and scale it through AI tools and monetize it with lead generation, sponsorships, and AdSense, you can go to podfire.com. We have a free ebook and a masterclass waiting for you there. John, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Okay, well, thank you very much for hosting me. Let's see, the common thread throughout my career, which has mainly been working with people with a blank sheet of paper. They might come from large media organizations or marketing organizations, and they'd come to me and say, what does this technology mean? Not what is it, how does it work, or who owns it or how much it costs, but what does it mean for us? So I've had to explain edge computing and 5G to bankers in a way that bankers should understand and care. And it's that second part, not just describing what it is, but getting people to care. That's been more or less the kind of the value that I've been able to create through the written work and through podcasts about AI since 2016. You mentioned the Augmented City. That was our original podcast brand because we were looking at the intersection of AI and urban life, which quite frankly was just this large, cool sounding umbrella term to where we could kind of poke around and try to figure, well, what's going to happen to transportation, healthcare, education, etc. And then ChatGPT launched in November 2022. I call up my producer and say, the brand we got is not the brand we need because the world changed. And he did a typical kind of technical producer, oh man, forget it, bullshit. And I was like, try it out. Sure enough, he calls me back, said, yeah, the world changed. So we took transcripts from over 200 shows and actually fed them into GPT and said, hey, tell us what we did. Tell us what the critical factor was. And it looked around all these different interviews that we did. I mean, we worked healthcare conferences, mobility conferences and stuff, just saying, hey, tell me what your business is. And the common thread was storytelling. The success or failure of all these initiatives, the single, not the only factor, but among the biggest and most consistent factors was their ability to tell a narrative, to persuade people to do something, whether on the inside or the outside. That's what, so when I talk about storytelling, sure, there's once upon a time, there's media, there's entertainment and information, but the bigger point is, how do human beings tell narratives to persuade other human beings to believe something and do something? And so that was the process of which we arrived at Culture and Code as the brand of our podcast that we relaunched in August of 2023, because fundamentally we believe that we got to have parallel evolution. You can't just throw tech over the wall and say, hey, you humans are flexible. You know how to cooperate. Deal with it. Those days are over because of different changes with AI. So in a very brief way, that's how I kind of got from there to here.
Yeah, storytelling is always the basis of a great ad, a great piece of content, a great book. And that's sort of the problem with GPT nowadays. You really need to feed it pretty much all your data so that it can create story from what you've lived, right? Else it's pretty much inauthentic. So what tools do you use to create your videos? How do you infuse story and data into it? And is it fully automated yet? Is it like an AI agent or still requires your human touch?
Well, the most recent I guess, revolution. I do believe this one is truly a revolution. I've been on about 5 main technology cycles, from early web through mobile, social, all the way up to AI. And one of the typical things is that when some kind of new paradigm is introduced to the public, what they're doing is they're focusing on the sexiest link of the chain. They're not talking about the whole system. And to tell the truth, internet was just a theory to most people in the 1990s until they ordered that first book from Amazon. And suddenly they said, I did X on my computer, and a book showed up on my doorstep. And suddenly the internet became real for people because they could not only learn stuff, they could do stuff. All right. And and even then, when Amazon launched, it was really clunky. Now it's banal, but people don't take into account that once technology becomes banal, that's when it's mature, not when it's introduced. And so, yeah, when as far as like our process, we use GPT, we use kind of the usual suspects: Runway, Midjourney, Luma, pretty much the whole clutch. But there are parts of our process which are pretty well automated. I'll run a script that I wrote through GPT and tell them, okay, you rewrite it. I'll take a look at what some of the differences are. Okay. Also, I'll use GPT to automate my translation. So I'll say, I'll write something in English because my main visual collaborator lives in Madrid. And if it's really, important that the fidelity of our conversation, that we meet well at the ideas, I'll say translate into modern Spanish. And then I'll take GPT's Spanish translation, I'll throw it into Claude, and I'll say, translate this into modern English. And then I'll compare. So for the really important stuff, I fact check my AIs. But yeah, I would say that there's certain parts of our process that are automated, but there's still a lot of hand tooling that is needed to make good AI movies.
Right. And when are we gonna get an AI that I can just feed it my data, tell it do a video about that, just like ChatGPT would write a nice article, right? And it would build the full video in a Mr. Beast quality, which doesn't seem like rocket science, just to mimic the style of the video. And AI can understand that, but yes, it would take tons of GPUs, right? Because the video is so heavy.
Well, if you're wanting to write something simple, and let's make sure, is like, what do you want your narrative to do? What's the job you hired this video to do? If the
Get subscribers, get subscribers in my niche, right? Like my ICP, my case being the Mr. Beast of business. Technically, that would be Alex Hormozy, sort of.
Okay. Well, then let's get an explainer type of video where the job you've hired the video to do is to explain a simple process so someone can troubleshoot their LinkedIn or StreamYard, which is a common format. That's actually pretty automatable, because what you're trying to do is give people the lowest friction access for them to get to their goal. I don't want to dwell on the how-to video. I want my my LinkedIn Live, or I want whatever it is to work. And so AI is pretty good at organizing in a logical flow and also in the style of right now. Now, if in future, if your video is saying, this is why you should use this tool, this is why you're trying to persuade somebody to actually alter their mind when there's choices in front of them. Well, that's a different kind of story you're telling. That's a different narrative. And as far as on the production side, yeah, sure, I'll trust AI to do that. As far as like the narrative side, AI is not there yet. Or you need to settle for the conventional wisdom. AI is fantastic at telling you the conventional wisdom.
Right. And if I would want, like, straight up to literally take the Alex Hormozy formula and have it on my YouTube, but with Charles' story, is there a current tool that can do that? Because I've talked with a YouTube automation guy not so long ago, and we're using like Hey Gen now because of
Hmm.
him, which is creating my avatar, right? And then that API could be connected with Veed's API and Opus API, for example, and could create like one central video. So I'm just wondering, why isn't there a startup that has gone deep into that? Is it the cost of GPUs to actually render these videos? Is it because it would literally cost me $15 per video and they can't scale it as a startup?
I'd vote for door number two, because what you're describing is a very clear opportunity to solve a problem, which as a startup, that means I got to solve the problem faster than YouTube's going to solve it. I got
Yeah.
to convince people that my solution's better than YouTube faster than they can come out with theirs. And so it's a bit like being a skilled lightweight fighter, and now you moved up to heavyweight. It's true, you're faster than the other guy. You know, you can pepper him with punches. He just needs one, and you're gone. So I think that's a big reason why you're not seeing a lot of startups going for that solution, because it's very clear that the giants like YouTube are going to have it in spades. If not now, then by summer.
But Google is so slow. They have the financing, but even with Gemini, they don't have like the company culture, the energy, the youth, the desire to create something bigger than ChatGPT, let's say. Even Sora was the leader, is still the leader in AI video, I believe, arguably, if you compare it with like various categories. I think Google's like is like a slow innovation culture. It's like gerontocrats running the show. And even if they have the funds, you can't really buy culture, right? What do you think about that?
Well, my romantic heart will always be with the startup, but I live probably less than 10-minute drive from Microsoft corporate campus, and Microsoft just turned 50. And Microsoft has been pelted with egg in the face all through its history, and somehow has soldiered on to the tune of billions of dollars every quarter. Um, I'm not saying that automatically means, you know, they'll win. I mean, they've gone through their transitions just like Google's going to go through its transition. I would arguably say Google's a bit more fragile than Microsoft because so much of its revenue is based on advertising. But one of the things I believe startups often miss, and I say this from personal experience because I missed, is that they assume that because of a lot of the, you know, gerontocracy, you know, the slow decision making and stuff, that automatically means the big, you know, the big incumbents are at a disadvantage. But one thing the big incumbents have, based on their capitalization and scale and relationships, they got more opportunities to make mistakes and recover. You're a startup, you're on a burn rate, you're not taking in revenue, and you miss, it hurts.
Yeah, for sure. But the best they could do, Microsoft, is acquire OpenAI, right? Well, I mean, acquire. It's a partnership, right? So they don't own it.
It's a common law marriage. That's what it.
Yeah, yeah, sort of.
They're shacking up.
Yeah. So, like, will that solve their big fundamental problem, which is that, yeah, investors just want their return? You know, it brings a fundamental question. I think
Yeah.
these trillion-dollar startups or future trillion-dollar startups are really going to have a higher motivation. Not only are they going to be run by a technical and business genius, but they're going to have a higher purpose than just money. I mean, there's no bigger moonshot than ChatGPT, and the result of it is crazy. Do you agree?
I do agree, but I also want to add that this is one reason why I come back to the storytelling, because do a thought experiment and imagine we're, I don't know, early 2010s or something, where we're as a globe, we're kind of winding down a few wars. Technology industry's coming in with these amazing new tools. We're connecting in new ways over over social media. And so
Yep.
there was generally a net positive feel among the customer base, not just the consumers, but also in the B2B space. Contrast that today. And so many people, especially with AI for better or worse, has become an important lens through which people are looking at the pace of change in general, political change, economic change. And it boils down to a single question of, where do I fit in if so much is being automated away? And unless the tech industry can come up with a good story and a good narrative to tell people this is why you should consent to being monitored and this is why it's a good thing, if they can't tell that story, it doesn't mean that people are going to automatically reject what they're doing, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. Even now, Apple comes out with a new iPhone, and sure, there's a few news stories that show lines around the block in a few places, but it's not a cultural moment anymore. Even now, we look at how our culture changed, and you could argue that the past weekend's Super Bowl in the United States was simply a concert wrapped with a football game, as far as like what people's interests were. So I think that everything you said about where the tech industry is going is entirely true, but I think that the tech industry is going to make a profound mistake if they misread the market they're in. If they operate business as usual, they might get bit on the butt big time.
Right. And to me, Apple's quite kind of pathetic, right? It's like the apogee of consumerism. And that's like, and it's also beautiful from a business standpoint, right? Because it's such a simple business model. Um,
Well, that's one.
they like canceled the privacy, the data gathering stuff, and they went all in on privacy. And because of that, now they can't deploy an AI. And I know that I'm probably not their ICP, but anytime I speak to Siri, it's so pathetic because right before that, I've just spoken with ChatGPT Advanced Voice, which is like having a conversation with a friend,
That's
literally, a very, very smart friend, a genius of a friend. And yeah, like I'm just not seeing how they can recover from that because it seems like it's a one-way door, right? It's like, hey, we're gonna take care of your data. So now they can't take care of they can't gather the data of their customer, hence they can't have a data moat. And I feel this is how companies will build on AI. So what should they do there?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of discussion about what is a moat when you're talking about AI. And quite frankly, I don't think anyone's figured out, a clear moat anymore.
Well, data is a big moat, right? Like if YouTube has a big moat, Apple could have a moat because Google Gemini is on Google search and YouTube, and that is a humongous moat. It's so hard to that would be one reason why Google wouldn't die even if they have huge sum of capitals. It's like this data moat. So if Apple could take that data, that health data, and they don't even need to know exactly like who does it come from, right? And I think they can play on the fine print here on the legal terms and conditions they have assigned and give us data as a return. Hey Siri, what's my health today? How can I improve my health? For example, I think that is a moat right there. They have the hardware, so maybe they'll take advantage on that, but they're so slow to take decisions.
Well, if you go to the airport and every cliched business book screams out, data is the new oil, data is the new oil. Well, my question is, okay, if it's the new oil, what's the new steel? What gives structure? What gives form to this oil lake of data that that you're dealing with? And I would argue that's where the not just the algorithms, but the business processes, the culture of a company, the way that they can read that data. Just anecdotally, during the Cold War, the East German state kept a file on every citizen. Some were thin, some were thick. They had data. They had knowledge of every single person, where they lived, all that kind of stuff. Well, look how much good it did them. They didn't know how to make sense of it. They didn't have a structure. They were just gathering it. And so in many ways, I think the big challenge for creating the moat, there is certainly data, and that's necessary, but I don't think it's sufficient. It's going to come down to what is literally the creativity within an organization to where they can structure data to ask it interesting questions. And if they don't get that right, it doesn't matter how much data they got.
Right. I'd argue that the steal is like the GPUs, right? With NVIDIA.
Yeah.
NVIDIA, like it's been
I'm, I,
interesting, right? Like the stock drop as of late with
I,
what it's called DeepSeek.
yeah,
That was so weird.
I'm definitely a fan of DeepSeek because I was able to pick up a lot of NVIDIA cheap. So I'm long that way.
Have you tried DeepSeek and these new Chinese LLMs like Quen?
I haven't tried Quim. I did try DeepSeek, and definitely it is impressive. Everything they said about it, as far as a lot of its performance, is true. Right up to the point you start asking those uncomfortable questions. You want to, which is a separate podcast. But
Yeah, I mean that was my first question when I talked
yeah,
to Quen, like Communist Party questions, because I wanted to test the core fundamentals of it, like who's prompted this thing, who's built this thing, is it going to be censored, right? Because if there's censorship, how can you get intelligence, right? You just get like a version of reality that is not the true version of reality.
well, I mean, say what you will. Russia was a closed society. They sent people into orbit. I mean, there's it depends on what type of intelligence that you're talking about.
Well, the scalable one that won't take
Right.
me in my bed at 2 a.m. because I said something about
Yeah,
them that they didn't like.
that's true. That's very true.
Yeah,
But
that's Russia, then China. I mean, China's a bit less worse than Russia, in my opinion. I've been there. It's an amazing country, by the way, amazing people,
mhm.
top food and culture and stories, right? I think the West is good at painting false narratives about its quote unquote enemies. And there would be a better world if like everyone would just open the communication channels and talk. But yeah, imagine if Russia had its own model. Pretty sure they're gonna have it soon.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That would be very weird.
Yeah,
Because
that's
Russia, I
true.
mean, they committed murders in the open, right? Like it's not really much a secret.
But
U.S.
the
too.
yeah, I mean, on balance, on balance, free and open inquiry is, or we say, with the more eyes, the more on something, the faster the bugs surface. You try to basically run knowledge through a straw, it's always going to feel disjointed. It's always going to feel that.
Yeah, and maybe an LLM that would take all these LLM together because the West that doesn't have the pure truth as well.
One
Um,
LLM to rule them all.
yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
the co-founder of OpenSea, the NFT marketplace, he created this open LLM. I forgot. I always forgot what it's called, which is a big branding problem, right? But yeah, it's you give it you chat in one box, and then it gives the results of all of these LLMs, right? And you
mhm.
can straight up compare which one are good or not. John, thanks for coming on today. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, you can go to cultureandcode, one word, .io. That's our main website. And then for the film festival, the Seattle AI Film Festival is going to be March 29th and 30th at Seattle Center, across from the Gates Foundation. And so far, we have 71 films from 19 countries. And our goal is to actually help humanize AI with art and get people looking at quality more than headlines when they're trying to think about where do they fit in. So you can go to Seattle AI Film Festival, one word.com, and find out more. But thank you very much for having me on the podcast.